Today's webinar, Easing the Load of Location and Constraint Searches with Self-Service. Just before we begin, the session today will be about 40 minutes long and we'll be sending out the recording link by email afterwards, so no need to be writing lots of notes. Time permitting, we'll be having a question and answer session at the end. There's a question panel in the top right where you can submit your questions at any time throughout the seminar. Please do that and we'll pick up on those at the end. Also, we'd be very grateful at the end if you could complete our short survey, which will pop up. This will help us with future webinars. Finally, just to let you know, you are in listen-only mode and so we can't hear you. Just to introduce us today, my name is Demelza Potter. I work in the business development team here at CAG Corp and I predominantly work with local and central government customers. My co-presenter today is Ian Usher. Ian heads up our pre-sales team and he'll be delivering a live demo later on. These are the points we will be covering today, starting with a bit about CAG Corp, as I can see some of you listening are new to CAG Corp. Then taking a step back, I'll be making sure we're clear about what a constraint search is, the challenges and how they can help your authority. Then I'll pass across to Ian to show you in practice. He's demonstrating a product today called Find It, followed by the ways to make a self-service search. Then I'll round up at the end by answering your questions. So a bit about CAG Corp. We're UK based and we focus on the development and delivery of our product CAG Corp SIS, which includes web, mobile and desktop GIS applications. We work across various sectors with government being the focus of today's webinar. We also work across central, local government and also down to town and parish councils. So, taking a step back, what do we mean by a constraint search? Today, we're specifically discussing the need to spatially analyse and report on a large number of GIS datasets. At a simple level, we're interested in a location, or for this example, perhaps within 50 metres of a location, and we want to know if there's any GIS data here. In this example, is there a conservation area close by? Are there TPOs? Are there overhead power cables, for example? To find out what constraints or controls might affect a chosen site or location is what we're doing. And this is for your consultations, plans or strategy reports that you may have to do within your organisation. We're looking at, today we're looking at officers from different departments who need to use the data and find out what constraints might affect the location, or it might just be things like to be aware of, like access restrictions or planned works. However, we don't want to restrict this to council employees. Members of the public and councillors will also have an interest in this information and they will need to access it in an easy way. Coming on to our poll today, does your organisation currently provide self-service constraint searches like I've just explained, yes or no? You should be able to click on yes or no on the screen. So can you actually access this type of search yourself? I'll just wait for the results to come in. So 68% of you currently are saying no. So you could make use of a tool which does this, which is really good. So the constraints challenges. We're well aware that there's increasing demand for constraints type analysis. In terms of your GIS resource, it's limited. There's probably one or two people within the GIS capability within the organisation. GIS desktop software has the capability, but this often requires training. But also there's a demand for accessible tools with standardized reporting. And just because a GIS is used for analysis, it's not necessarily the best method of presentation of that information. So today we're going to talk through how web mapping, like we have displayed here, is the ideal tool for constraints and location searches through various use cases. Ian's going to demonstrate our product called Find It in a moment, and you can see in the background we're utilising Ordnance Survey mapping, in this case Ordnance Survey master map topography data as a backdrop. Now, historically, constraint searches have been carried out by planning or land charges departments to let an applicant, if there's any limits to property or land developments or restrictions in use. So the first use case we're going to take a look at is a planning use case. So, and this might be a resident checking for existing planning applications or pre-planning to see whether the property might be over the permitted development allowance. This allows residents to take a look for themselves and also discourages invalid applications. Worth noting that some CACOP customers have been discussing adding payment gateways and charging for this type of service for members of the public or third parties to use. The second use case we're going to come on to is once planning permission has been applied for, an officer might need to know how the local plan may influence a decision. In addition, they may need to drill down on the data and investigate in more detail. But beyond planning, there are other applications of the technology within a council's remit. So the third use case we're coming on to is land available for development, and this may be able to put relevant information into the HELA report, the Housing and Economic Land Availability Assessment. But similar searches could be set up for land acquisition or disposal too. And the final use case we'll come on today is provide the basis of an environmental impact assessment report. Now, you may be able to think of more use cases as Ian's demonstrating or as we're going through the rest of the presentation today. Please use the question box on the top right to suggest any other examples you can think of. So now I'm going to pass across to Ian, who's going to show how the Find It tool does all of this.
Okay, thank you, Demelza. So hopefully everybody can hear me. If not, just let us know and we'll know there's something going wrong. But what I'm going to do today is I'm just going to go through the use cases that Demelza has mentioned in her presentation. So the first one we're going to look at is a member of the public that has just recently moved into their new house, and they are looking at doing some work and they want to know what the permitted development right was and if there's any applications that already exist on that particular site. So what a member of the public will do is they will visit a website, and straight away what we'll see is that we can get a map of the area that we're interested in. So we're doing this through a web mapping application. What the member of the public will do is firstly they will type in the postcode that they're after. So I'm going to type in our postcode, and when we see the postcode that we are interested in, we can click on that and the system will navigate to the area that we are currently living in. So what we're going to say is that the number 142 is our dwelling that we're interested in, and under the what would you like to do, we have our particular Find It tool that allows us to perform constraints checking in multiple different ways, and we'll see how these multiple different ways work when we go through each of the use cases. So the first one we're going to do is our member of the public simply wants to select the house that they're interested in. So what we're going to say is that we're going to select our master map data, and what I do is check the master map, select the building that I'm interested in, and what you'll see is the building has been highlighted from the master map data. But what it's also done is it's given us the TOID reference, so we can always relate this back later to the particular polygon that's been selected. As a user, what we can then do is we can click search. So straight away, the system comes back, and in this example, all it's doing is searching for existing planning applications that intersect that particular building. So what you'll see from our search results is it tells us when that search has been executed, at the time, any copyright statements that we've got, and then it will show you the number of planning applications that exist. So we've got 3 results that have been found. We've got an application reference number that's coming from the schema. We've got a status, a year, application type, and if we scroll down, we can see those 3 individual plan applications that are available to us. To ensure that we get a hard copy of that report, what we might also want to do is say that we want to download this as a PDF. So if we click download as PDF, I'm going to save this as our pre-planned check. And then what you'll see is when we load up our PDF document, is that our PDF document contains exactly the same kind of information. So the first thing you will see is we've got a search date and time of when we conducted the search. We've got a report reference that is a unique reference number that enables us to see what constraints were intersected the polygon in question that we've had available. We've got the number of results in front of us. We've got a nice map that shows us exactly what the area that was drawn or selected that allows us to see the where the find it results were completed against. And then what you'll see as part of that PDF list is we've got our pre-plan application check, which includes the plan application polygons that have been found. So we've got the same schema. So we've got the application reference, the status, the application type, the plan officer, the district, and what you'll see as we scroll down, we've got each of those 3 individual polygons in question. And then what you might want to do as an end user is put a disclaimer on the bottom to say that this is all good and well, but you might also want to put a disclaimer on that says you might need to check firstly with the authority to make sure there's nothing else that exists. So in theory, what our member of the public will then do is they will then pass this to the local authority and submit a plan application for them to be able to start the work that they have planned. So what we're going to do now is take the instance of our planning officer who's received that application. So if I say I'm going to open a new window, I'm going to now go to another website, and what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to pretend that I'm the planning application officer, and we're running a planning constraint check this time. And unlike what you saw last time, this time we need to log in because we're a planning officer and we have secure data that's held behind here. And what happens is when I log in, we'll see a slightly different map because it will give us all the plan applications that have been submitted recently within our authority. So again, the first thing the plan officer will do is put exactly the same postcode in, and they'll go to the site. They can see the existing plan applications because they've got access to that data in front of them. So as this is a new plan application, they might want to create that new plan application via the web mapping. So we can say that we want to create a new plan application. We know it's a polygon, and we're also going to enable snapping to make sure it's accurate to the master map data, so that when I start to draw the area that the member of the public was interested in, you'll see it snap into the master map underneath, which ensures that it's accurate. And then we can then edit the attributes. So I'm going to say that this is the year 2020, 001 application. It's a full application. We might have a drop down that makes it easier for us to change the status. So we can see that this is a new plan application. We can enter the year and the application type, which is we'll put an extension to rear. Similar with the plan officer, you might have a drop down that makes it easier to choose. Dates can be added. So I'm going to say we've got a received date, and the determined date can be 2 weeks from that. And then district and ward can automatically be filled in by spatial queries that run underneath. And then when we click save, it adds that polygon into our plan application database. And then what it allows us to do is now we can use the find it tool to select the information that we're interested in. So if I say this time that we want to select the feature, we can click over the property in question, and we have the 3 applications that came up as part of the pre-plan check, but we've also got the new application, which was the one we've just created. So we're effectively running the planning constraints check this time on the application that we've just done. And what you'll see is when I click search, our plan officer this time is looking at our local plan constraints, for example. So information such as our section 106 agreements and our conservation areas. We've got green belt and local landscape character areas in there that have been found, but there could be multiple others that might not intersect that particular polygon that we've got in question. What you'll also see again is we've got different schemas as well. So we can see as part of our section 106, we've got the location and the reference and the source. Our conservation areas have got a policy type and contain a website link, and we'll see how that's used in a second as well. But once we've got all of these constraints back, what we can then do is we can say that we want to download that as a PDF. I'm going to call this plan constraint check. And then what you'll see is we've got a PDF. This time it's designed differently. So we've got a different header. We can see it's planning constraint check. We've got the same search date and time and the report reference and the number of results that have been found with a nice map that shows that area that we've been selected. But what it'll then do is it will give us the features one to a page. So we can see the section 106 agreements has been found with one, and we can see the schema that's come across as part of that. The conservation areas, it's found two, and we can see the schemas that have come across. And like I say, it's really useful to have the URLs in there, because when we say that we want to open the data in a new tab, it takes us exactly to the appropriate place on the appropriate local plan constraint that we've got within that PDF, which is really nice. So it keeps all the information in one place. And then the same with the local landscape areas. And then further down, we've got our greenbelt features that have been found as well. And again, this just points to a different URL that is appropriate to where that data is as well. So that's our member of the public that submitted the planning application, and the planning officer's done their planning constraints check. But as Demelza said, there's other different ways of using the Find It application. So the other one could be our housing and economic land availability assessment, which is an appraisal of the amount of land available for development within a local authority area. So the planning officer, this time in question, knows the area that they're interested in to look at kind of the constraints that might fall within the area that they are questioning. And what they will do is they will click on the Find It tool. This time they are going to draw the feature that they're interested in. So we're going to say that this piece of land to the south of the golf course is the one that we are questioning. We can double click to finish, and then when we click search, the system will go away and queries a completely different set of data. So this is more specific to the housing and economic land availability report that looks at kind of the overhead lines and tree preservation orders within that area, which there are a lot of. We've got housing land that exists, local nature reserves that might exist, sites of biological importance, and maybe brownfield sites as part of that. So there's a lot more data that exists in this type of search. But again, we can see the schema that's come across. When we are happy with that, we can say that we want to download that as a PDF. And again, this time it gives us the PDF option. I'm going to call this our appropriate name for that file. And then what we can do again is open that up. We can see a different report this time. Search date and time exists. We've got the report reference with the number of results. It gives us a map with the area drawn in question. And then again, we can see all the schema columns that have come across from our overhead lines, from our tree preservation orders, which was quite a few found. So we've got the TPO name and the east and north in. There's 14 in total, so it puts them on 3 pages. We've got our housing land features that might be there, and our local nature reserves as part of it. But like I say, there's a lot of data that's gone into that one, and these are just the items that is found on that particular polygon that we've just drawn. And then finally, what we might also want to do as part of the planning authority is do an environmental impact assessment. So this is to protect the environment by ensuring the likely effects of development have been identified when it comes to site selection. So the planning officer this time can put in a postcode, and they will go to a particular site. And what they want to do this time is they want everything that falls within 300 meters of the site we've got in question. So what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to say we want to use the Find It, and using the last tool that we've got in question is the draw buffer. So we can select it. I'm going to say that the buffer we're going to have is 300 meters. We're going to say from the middle of that field that we were looking at. And then what I can do is click search. And again, the system goes away, queries a completely different set of data. and this time it's looking at national parks and areas of outstanding natural beauty and World Heritage Sites, scheduled ancient monuments. All of that data comes through, all with the relevant schema columns, and again, some with URLs, which are useful to look at in a second. Again, with the search date and time that it was completed. And then when we say we want to download that as a PDF, if we call this our environmental impact assessment, we can save that. And then, as we've seen previously, we've got a nice little PDF. Again, this one based on the environmental impact assessment report. We've got the search date and time, we've got the report reference, the number of total results that have been found with a map. It lists all of the data again, so we can see our national parks with the relevant schemas, areas of outstanding natural beauty, we've got the World Heritage Sites, and then things like this scheduled ancient monuments have got a unique URL, so we can see this is our carved rock on bank of Hobeck. If we open that up in the URL, you'll see that this goes directly to the Historical England website, where it lists more details rather than just the schema that we are holding on the particular GIS data that we are searching on. So it's a really good way of getting the data across from multiple different sources. So what you've seen from me is kind of the use cases that Demol's has talked about. So we looked at a member of the public who wants to search for plan applications within the site, our planning officer who's doing local plan queries. We've got the housing officer who's doing our housing and economic land availability appraisals. And then finally, we've got our environmental impact assessment that's been run as well. So what I will do now is pass you back over to Demolza.
Thanks, Ian. Just as a reminder, the questions panel top right, if you do want to ask either Ian or myself any questions on anything you've seen so far. So we've seen a few use cases, and as I said earlier, the information that's provided, mainly probably from the PDF reports, could be used in consultations, plans, strategies, impact assessments, and other reports that you may do within your organisation. We came up with these listed at the bottom of other potential examples, so flooding, rights of way, changes, transport infrastructure changes. A couple of you have come forward today and said it might be useful for freedom of information request. Yep, I can see that as this type of tool being useful for that, and also solicitor land ownership queries. Yes, again, that type of information can all be made available such that it's accessible. And I'm sure you can think of others. So what we're saying today is the simple Find It tool, the technology can be utilised across the organisation. It's not just a tool for planning and land charges. So what are we doing here using this tool? So we are using geographic information in an accessible format to help inform decision-making processes across the organisation. Also, we are making searches self-service with Find It, so that anyone within your organisation and indeed outside of your organisation can access information. So using Find It displays data on a map and makes GIS data easy to use. So there's a Google map-like familiar slippy interface and search. Constraints can be mapped on screen with attribute information, which may be good enough for some purposes. However, chances are you've got dozens of data sets which will need to be analysed in a quick and consistent and repeatable manner. As well as displaying the data, it needs to be available in an understandable format and to be able to be further distributed to others. A customizable PDF report like Ian showed is just the way to do that. Whilst the public may need open access to a certain amount of data, internal users may need to be able to help themselves in a more controlled manner. So data may be sensitive. They may need access to appropriate data sets via their login. and indeed some data may not be appropriate to publish to the public at all. Access to live data, so your live GIS database, the data could be coming from Oracle, SQL Server, PostGIS. However, it's not really limited to that. So you may have an asset management system, a planning system, or simply GIS data from third parties. CACOP software supports over 300 different data formats, databases, web services. So if the data's out there, chances are we can get it into find it for you to be able to report on that data. So the data sets feed into a set of maps, the basis of which are the basis of different searches, which can be set up for each business purpose. That might be on a departmental basis or even down to an individual user basis if that was required. So just to start rounding up today, Find It is an off-the-shelf multi-purpose tool which allows many users access to search information relevant to them in a standard, easy and accessible way. Users can self-serve and utilize the results to make informed decisions and be sure that the data that is being used is current without taking up valuable GIS team time. So just moving on to your questions. First of all, can CACOP host the application and layers? Yes, CACOP can host. We've got various services available, included fully hosted web mapping and database services. They're hosted on Microsoft Azure. Happy to have a more in-depth conversation about that after the webinar today for anyone who's interested. Could you send a copy of the PDF report? Yes. Who's asked that? We can send out the PDF with the webinar recording email that will go out after today. There's also an online demonstrator that you can try yourselves. Coming to some of the others, can Find It be used within Map Editor, Map Modeler to search constraints based on layers within a workspace? So Find It is a web mapping application. It does actually use the workspaces or SWDs for CACOP users to be able to run the search upon, but it does not run in the desktop itself. Would be useful for emergency planning team via secure login. Yep, that's another use case. Is it possible for users to toggle on and off constraints that they wish to be included in the PDF reports? Not currently, but that's a really good enhancement request that we will look at to take forwards. Thank you for that question. Is it possible to run Find It queries without the map by just specifying an address or site reference? Not currently, but again, that's a really interesting way of thinking about GIS. Often we think of GIS that has to be a map in the background, but that's not actually necessarily the case, and that's something we can look into in a little bit more detail. So just started to use Find It for planning constraints, but also like to use it for other searches, e.g. land charges. Is it possible to have multiple maps set up for Find It to allow us to do that? Yes, that's possible and made a lot easier within version 9, the latest release of the software. Oh, one final question. Could this be used to query highways extents? With this, we can show very limited detail, and the user has requested certain area, and then there is a charge for us. Yes, I think that is a potential. I'll probably give you a call after today and discuss that in a little bit more detail with you to find out the full requirements of that. Okay, we are running out of time today. So I'll quickly roundup. If you think of any questions after the webinar I'd like to discuss, find it in more detail, here are my details. We have all of your details today, so if we've not come to your question, or I can speak to you in further detail, I will get in contact after today. Please come along to meet us in person at one of these events, the CAGCOP Local Government Conferences. Have a free lunch on us. We'll be demonstrating a major exciting new release which is currently in the pipeline. We've got the 10th of March in London or the 17th of March in Liverpool currently. And these events are really good at face-to-face conversation with peers and networking with contacts in your area. There will be a link sent along with the webinar recording for you to register if you would like to come along. Finally, thank you for attending today. We look forward to your presence at future CAGCOP events and webinars. Finally, just as you exit today, could you complete the short survey that will now pop up such that we continue to deliver quality webinars for the future for you. Thank you.